Hello and welcome to the Law Eagles podcast. I have on the show today Will Hage. He's with WestPac Wealth Partners. He's a wealth management advisor and his company operates in California, Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon, and Arizona. His contact information is on the screen and I would highly recommend contacting him. He's very knowledgeable and he's going to jump into what he does here in a moment. For my audience, I want everybody to understand the reason, that I'm bringing him on the show. It's important once you have a recovery and you obtain fair justice from a case, from a traumatic brain injury, from a spinal injury, from some way that you get injured and you end up with a recovery, you have to put that money somewhere where you can protect it, where it can be there for you in the future. That's the purpose of going through the legal process. And Will Hage is one of the people that can help you with this. So, Will, I wanted to thank you for being on the show today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm well. Thank you. Welcome to my home office here. Still quarantined at home. Our office is open. However, we have limited it to what we call essential workers. And so coming from my home office today, still waiting on a haircut, but can't complain about anything.
You just shave it off. Makes it so much easier.
Trust me, I've threatened a number of times, and my kids are all for it. My wife is like, "Oh heck no."
You got a nice round head, though. I think it would work on you.
Thank you.
So, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been in this industry for 17 years, and helping people with their finances. But what really is important to me, Eric, is family. And
gotcha. I heard that I wanted to ask you about that too, because you were telling me that you went on a 60-mile hike with your kids out in New Mexico, and that sounded amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely one of my highlights. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, and definitely one of my highlights with the kids. Both my kids are in scouting. I'm an Eagle Scout myself, and we had the opportunity to go to Philmont Scout Ranch this last summer, and we did a little bit over 60 miles over the course of 10 days, and it was just an absolute beautiful, amazing trip there in the Taos Mountains of New Mexico.
That's awesome. I love the Scouts. I had my son in the Scouts for a year, and he learned a lot. It was a very good experience for him. So, that's really cool. I was a Marine, so I love that stuff. So it was fun for me.
Once a Marine, always a Marine, right? Once an Eagle Scout, always an Eagle Scout.
Right. That's right. Cool. Well, I want to jump into this a little bit. How is it that you help your clients? What do you do?
Yeah, so I really help my clients build a strong balance sheet and protect that balance sheet from threats that could impact it today and or at some point in the future.
Cool. How do you do that?
Yeah, so Eric, there's really 5 different ways that we try to accomplish that with every client. It really comes down to the value proposition that we strive for. And the first is really we focus on financial organization. Most people are completely disorganized with their finances. And when we say disorganized, or when I say disorganized, it's not just about knowing where your assets are. Most people have a pretty good idea about that. But it's really more about the synergy that is or isn't behind the financial decisions that people make. And oftentimes what we find is people work with different advisors. They have a CPA, a mortgage broker, an attorney, an investment person, an insurance provider, and they're getting a different advice from all these different people. And so oftentimes what we find is that there's conflicting advice, even amongst advisors that are doing a great job for you.
So you're kind of organizing everything. You're trying to get it straightened out.
Yeah, and I'll share with you in just a second what that looks like. But what I find is that let's take an investment advisor whose job is to create return on the balance sheet, and the CPA's job is to reduce taxes from the balance sheet or on an annual basis. So both of these advisors are doing exactly what you're hiring them to do, but they have conflicting strategies because the unintended consequence of creating return on the balance sheet is it's also creating taxes, whether it be ordinary income taxes or capital gains taxes. It's counterproductive to what the CPA is trying to do. So really what we're trying to do is act as the financial quarterback or the personal CFO to see where those inefficiencies might lie and figure out a strategy around how it is that we're able to bring those advisors together, or at least put a strategy in between them to make sure that they're moving in the same direction and not in opposite directions.
Gotcha.
So
What does that organization? Yeah, what does that organization look like?
Yeah, let me just share with you what I mean by that. I'm going to share my screen here. So what you're looking at here on the screen is literally every financial decision you can make across what we call four different domains, which is really comes down to four different areas of your financial life: of protection, assets, liabilities, and cash flow. And so as we meet with people, initially when we meet with people, we're able to take the financial decisions that they've already made and begin to organize their life so visually they can very clearly see what they have going on in each of these different areas. And the irony of it is, a lot of times, just by starting to fill in numbers in these different categories, it's very obvious to them as to where there might be threats or where there might be things that need to be addressed just simply by a zero. They're like, oh, I never thought about how do I protect against lawsuit? Or shoot, I have all of my money sitting in retirement plans and I don't have anything in regular investments. So it's little things like that that now allow people to self-discover and helps the conversation towards whatever it is that we're planning towards.
That makes sense. That is a great layout. So this is something clients are able to access and actually go in here and add whatever they want, whatever they need to add for these different buckets.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Cool. That's awesome.
So the second area that we really help people is helping them protect. Right, you're in an industry where people have injury, whether it be due to some event that has occurred in their life, and the way we protect, or the way we get around that, is making sure that we have protection. Right, and protection doesn't have to be in the form of insurance; it can be in the form of legal documents. And so really what we're doing is making sure that whatever it is that we're planning towards, most people that we sit down with are not going to retire in the next year. They're not going to sell their business in the next year. Their kids aren't going to college right away, or at least in the next 12 months. And retirement's not happening in the next 12 months. So it's really important that we make sure that we protect first, to make sure that the foundation of their financial plan is intact. So if there's any threats that were to occur, those threats are going to already be covered and protected, so that the loss doesn't occur on your balance sheet. It actually is transferred to someone else's balance sheet, ideally an insurance company's balance sheet.
Gotcha.
And so, again, doesn't have to necessarily be in the form of insurance. It could be in the form of legal documents, through estate planning, or maybe even business planning that is applicable to a particular client. But again, having a foundation of protection first and foremost is really where we have to start.
Gotcha. And those can be actually protections that are through your employer too, correct? You might have
Absolutely.
Some disability benefits through your employer.
Yeah, and what we find is that those types of protections are good to have. Couple things to be aware of that not everybody realizes is, one is they're not transferable, meaning most of them, if you were to go to another employer and that employer didn't have the same benefit package, you can't take your disability coverage from your previous employer to your new employer, as an example. So, and then a lot of times there might be a little bit of a gap between what your actual income is or whatever it is that you're protecting, to where we can supplement some additional individual coverage on top of it to make sure that we're filling in those gaps and we're taking care of all the threats that could exist.
That's really important. I've dealt with this in the past, where employees have no idea that they even have disability benefits through their employer. sometimes they forget about it. They'll get 3-4 years into working for an employer, won't even think about it. And then all of a sudden they end up injured, long-term disability, and they don't even think to go there. They eventually go there. Sometimes those insurance carriers don't always pay out. So we've had to resolve those for clients in the past. So that's good that you go over that, though, because that's a huge benefit. And a lot of people don't realize that they have those things, those types of insurance policies. And it's good that you go through and do the analysis, because how would you ever know unless you actually sit down and make sure you're doing it right?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Cool. So, you were talking about managing your taxes and managing your debt. You were kind of going into that a little bit at the beginning, and I believe that's your third step in the process. How do you guys go about doing that?
Yeah. So number 3 is really the third value proposition is really around tax and debt management.
It's okay. You can make mistakes on my show. I allow it.
I guess when you take taxes and debt, it comes out to TAT or whatever I was going to say.
That's funny.
So, but taxes really play an important part in planning for your future. Most people focus on taxes today, and tax planning today is good, but oftentimes it doesn't address the deferral of those taxes 5, 10, even 30 years down the road. So really, not only are we helping our clients with managing tax efficiency today, but how do we focus on minimizing taxes in the future? Because your CPA, they're getting paid to minimize tax today, right? So they may tell people to put money into different vehicles that is saving taxes today, but all we're doing is deferring that tax to some point in the future. And if you look at everything that's going on in our world today, such as bailouts and dollars that they've given people on unemployment. In recent years, we've had bailouts of financial institutions. We've had conversations of national health care. You and I were talking earlier about Social Security. What's the future of that look like? And when we look at those different points, do we believe that taxes are going to increase, decrease, or stay the same in the future? And, most people, when I ask that question, most people will say, I think taxes are going to increase in the future. Well, if that's the case, then we need to have a very clear understanding of the dollars that we're deferring today. We may actually end up paying more taxes on those dollars in the future, simply because we don't know what the future tax environment is going to be. We know what it is today, and it might be painful, but it may actually be more down the road, simply because we've got to pay for all these things that are occurring in our life today from a governmental standpoint.
Yeah, so stuff you never think about. That's good you're thinking about it.
Yeah. And that's really my job, is to bring things to light that most people, never even consider. And this is one of them. And so, it's important that we pay our fair share of taxes. But at the end of the day, we got to make sure that, we're efficient in how we pay our taxes. We're efficient in how we pay our debt. And oftentimes the two, need to be aligned, meaning we have to take a look at things from a global perspective, not just the individual decision that's in front of us, but by making the decision that's in front of us, how does that impact everything else? So we may be trying to save on taxes today, right? But yet we're paying 19% in interest on our credit cards, while at the same time we have an investment vehicle that's yielding 8%. So the 19% on the credit card is really dragging down everything else that's in front of us. So again, we've got to address things, holistically and not just in a vacuum.
Absolutely. And a good place to start is by not having 9% interest on anything.
Yeah.
On any debt you have. That's not good. It's a real bad idea.
Exactly. So the fourth thing that we get into, Eric, is really, what most people understand, but very few actually implement it, or if they do implement it, they don't implement it to the full extent that they can, and really has to do with savings. And when I say savings, I don't mean money just sitting in a savings account at the bank earning 0.1%. It's really savings means in my world is dollars that you're pulling off the table that you're setting aside for some future event. Again, whether it be planning for your kids' education, your own retirement, or buying a new house.
So dollars not spent.
Dollars not spent. That's a good way to look at it. Right. Right.
Good. Got
And
it.
so what we try to do is really help our clients become what we call world-class savers. And before I explain what that really means, let me ask you a question or two questions. And I guess the first one is, what drives you and why do you get up out of bed to go to work every day?
What drives me is, I have a desire I love the business I'm in. I love being an attorney. You know that I do insurance bad faith. I work on those types of cases. I also do personal injury. It's fun for me. I like the argument. I like putting the arguments forth. I like learning about the trial techniques, the things that I can use as my tools to get the clients the best results I possibly can. I really enjoy it. That's what gets me out of bed every day. That's what keeps me going. That, and also providing for my family, and of course, making sure that we're safe and secure, and that the community finds that I'm important. Those are all things that I think are valuable, and
Yeah.
out of bed.
Yeah, exactly. So the vision of you enjoying the work that you do and your family is what drives you and what allows you to wake up each morning and go to work, right?
Yep.
And so, as as that happens, and as you're planning for your kids' college or your own retirement, you need to be able to save money along the way, whether it be each day, each week, or each month. And you need that to be able to plan for the future, right? What we find is most people don't really save their money. They might put money aside up to the match of their 401k plan at their company. And the result is they're saving 3 to 5%, right?
Gotcha.
And at the end of the day, that really doesn't have a major impact. And what it does is it forces people to focus on chasing returns in their money, which we'll go over in a little bit. But the reality is that cash flow is ultimately critical to the objective, and focusing on what we can control, which is again cash flow, versus the things that we can't control, which is rate of return. Right.
I know what you're going to show later on in the show, which is exciting because I think it's really good talking about trying to chase after rates versus savings. Those things I think are fantastic. And I know what you're going to be bringing up later. So I'm really excited about you showing that, because it was really exciting when I got to see it. So go back into that. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. So, cash flow is really the most important objective. And just like there's a hierarchy of how we get dressed in the morning, right? Most people will put their pants on or their underwear on before their pants. Right.
Typically, that's the way to do it. I believe.
There's a hierarchy as to how we should utilize cash flow. And what we find is most people are utilizing their cash flow or deploying their cash flow opposite of really what they should be doing. What happens is the first dollars that they spend goes towards lifestyle. And what we find is when dollars go towards lifestyle first, the very, very first dollar that is being put away is actually going to Visa and MasterCard, right? Because people are living above their means. Then again, from there, they're putting money into a 401k plan. They may be saving, again, up to the match, 3 to 5%. And then what's left over is for them to protect as much as they can with as little cash flow as possible. And so the end result there is minimal protection and minimal savings. And so what we try to get our clients to do is do the opposite, right? Again, we got to build the foundation, so we got to protect first. Number two, we got to become a world-class saver. Ideally get to the point where we're saving 15% and even approaching 20%. If we've created the proper amount of savings, then there's less need to rely on Visa or MasterCard. So the debt that really only exists typically is long-term debt, maybe an auto loan, which I don't really consider a long-term debt, but a mortgage as an example. And then whatever's left over after that, people can go spend freely, knowing that they've paid the obligations they have to other people. they've saved the proper amount, and they've protected what they need to protect to make sure that if the unexpected life event occurs, they're going to be okay.
Got it.
Right. So, we believe again that savings rate really needs to be somewhere between 15 and 20% of your gross income. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's certainly something that, we need to strive towards. And again, if you are one of the 3 to 5% savers, that's fine. We're going to put strategies in place that are going to help you get to that 15 to 20% over time.
Gotcha. Yeah. Take the first step, it's a hard thing to imagine doing it that way and going through that process, but it sounds like something that you can work your way up to fairly easily. You just need to sit down and create the plan first. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. And, it's working with somebody like myself that is going to, stand alongside the client and be that financial coach to ask questions and to, take emotions out of the picture, because emotions, when it comes to planning, when it comes to investing, emotions really play a role in decision making. And sometimes that decision making, because emotions are part of that, could actually make people take steps backwards rather than move forward.
Gotcha. So you went through these. What's the last step? What's the final?
Yeah. So the fifth one is kind of, that next step of savings. And that is, the wealth management piece, right? And really with the wealth management piece and how we focus is making sure that people are appropriately compensated for the amount of risk that they're taking, and how does that relate to the return. And I guess the perfect example would be, let me ask you, is 15% good or bad in the market? If you could get 15% in the market, would that be good or bad?
That sounds pretty good.
That sounds good, right?
Yeah.
Until we take a step back and look at the external factors. Meaning, if you got 15%, but the stock market got 20%, and you had 100% of the correlation of the stock market, well, then maybe 15% isn't so good, right?
Yeah, right.
But conversely, if you have 100% risk of the stock market and the market did 12%, but you did 15%, well, then you did excellent, right?
Yep.
So it's really about understanding the volatility that someone's taking and making sure that a portfolio is designed to fully represent the volatility that is in that particular portfolio, to make sure that they're being adequately rewarded in the form of return for the risk that they're taking.
Gotcha. For the return on investment, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Cool. That's awesome. Let me ask you this. How have your clients been impacted by the current issues that we're having with coronavirus and COVID-19?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's really actually two parts to that question. And the reason for that is that there's two different types of clients I work with. One are business owners, and the other are individual families. So for my business owner clients, we really as a firm had to get up to speed very quickly on the CARES Act and the PPP loan programs that were being offered to businesses. So what we did was right away, we reached out to all of our business owner clients and had them contact their banks and begin the process for that loan. Most of them applied for it and have already received those funds. The other part of that question is actually something that I didn't even realize at the time, but it's really a testament to the planning that we do. We talk about protecting against threats as one of the core tenets of our planning process. And the number one way to ensure financial failure, which nobody really wants to strive for, is for cash flow to stop. Okay, and cash flow will stop typically in one of three ways: either a job loss, a sickness or injury, or some type of premature death. Two of those we can insure against. The first one, job loss, we can't, right? So how do we protect against job loss? We really have to create assets that are liquid. So most people are familiar with diversifying a portfolio and spreading their risk across their investments, different types of investments. What we're talking about here is, diversifying your portfolio or really your financial life across different buckets of long-term, mid-term, and short-term and mid-term being the most liquid, right? If all of our money is in a 401k and we need access to it, we're gonna have to pay taxes and penalties. So we want to make sure that we have money, at least 6 to 12 months worth of living expenses in those first two buckets. And really we call this planning towards unexpected life events. So taking this back to the pandemic, there's people that have been furloughed, there's people that have been laid off, there are people who, business owners who, have no revenue right now. But because of the fact that we have positioned our clients' assets in a way to where they have 6 to 12 months worth of living expenses on hand, they can survive if this thing goes on for 6 to 12 months without having to be concerned about where's my next paycheck going to come from. Most people, if they're lucky, they have 1 to 3 months worth of savings on hand, right?
Gotcha.
And so to me, if we can't survive past 3 months, now we have to start dipping in. If we have 3 months worth of savings on hand, and if we, don't have a job after 3 months, well, now we have to start dipping into our other assets, which is going to erode all the good work that's been done previously. All the good savings and the returns that you've gotten really meant nothing. So, planning for unexpected life events, or because of the fact that we plan for unexpected life events, I would say the majority, if not all of our clients, were already in an offensive position during this time because they were already able to absorb an event like COVID-19.
Absolutely. You say that for individuals. I think businesses, it seems like businesses should have the same plan. Be prepared to be able to, manage your costs and everything else for 3 to 6 months too.
Yeah, I heard a scary stat, and I don't know. I would imagine it's true, but I haven't verified it. But I heard that the restaurant industry, in part, why they're struggling so much is the margin on their food is so little that most businesses, most restaurants don't have more than 9 days of working capital on hand at any given time.
Wow. It's and it makes sense to a point. I mean, that's definitely an industry where there was a lot of competition, I think, back in over the last, especially like 5 years. As we came out of the last recession, I think more and more people got into more services, and one of those was the food industry. And I think there was a lot of competition in that arena. I think that really pushed prices down. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard. It's tough, doing business, doing what you love. You got to run it as a business. You got to make money. You got to try to make as much money out as you can. But if you love doing it, you're going to do it. Artists, restaurateurs, whoever it may be. It's too bad for the restaurants that the insurance carriers are being so strict with these business interruption claims. It's been frustrating for me because I represent clients that are going through this right now, especially restaurants and, service people that have local storefronts, because the insurance carrier, they should be paying out on a number of these claims. There's some carriers that have the virus exclusion, and that's going to be a tough argument. That's going to be something where the government's going to have to come in and say, hey, we're going to pay out on this. And I get it. That virus exclusion is going to be tough. But the ones that don't have virus exclusions, which is probably like 50 to 60% of policies, you'd be surprised how many don't have it. The insurance carriers are still fighting with those businesses, with their clients. They're not providing coverage, and it's wrong. They should be giving coverage to those people. It's disappointing, and I'm really, it's unfortunate, and it's clearly covered under the policy. It's just they're not willing to pay. So
sure, and I would say too, I mean, that's a testament to having a good team of advisors around you before something like this happens, right? Making sure that you have a commercial insurance broker that they're working with that, is able to fully outline everything that they have in that insurance policy and what that means. It's interesting just on the personal level. I'll talk to people about their auto insurance and homeowners insurance. And I don't do auto insurance or homeowners insurance, but I'll just ask them a simple question. And that is, how much lawsuit protection do you have? Meaning, how much general liability coverage do you have? And I'd say 90% of the people that I ask that question to, one, they don't know the answer to it. And two, they don't know what that means.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Right.
Those are answers that you cannot, not know. You need to know those things. Those are
right. And
fundamental life lessons. Yeah. I mean,
lawsuit would be the number one eroding factor of, potentially a major eroding factor of someone's balance sheet, their net worth.
Absolutely. And it's funny when you look at, for an individual, for their liability coverage, let's say you got a $300,000 liability policy. That's not that much more expensive than your kind of base rate policy for most people. It's not a crazy number. It's usually not that different. And then going beyond that, getting a liability policy, getting a $1 million umbrella, or even a $2 million umbrella policy, which really protects you, if you're in like kind of the upper middle class, even middle class, honestly. A lot of people in California have homes that are worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They have personal liability. Personal liabilities could be just detrimental to their future. But getting a $1 million umbrella policy is not that expensive. You can get those usually for like an extra $15, $20 a month. It's not, it's not that expensive. It's really not. Yeah. And for the business insurance side, it drives me nuts when people go out to insurance carriers that don't operate in the commercial space regularly. And when I'm talking about the commercial space, you got to look at restaurants, you got to look at, sport venues, you got to look at, your local retailers, your malls, your industrial facilities. Each one of those is going to have different insurance coverages that have completely different plans. It's going to be completely separate. And, these are people, the brokers that do that type of work, they're so specialized in that. Going out to to some of these insurance carriers that, some of the policies I've seen for businesses, it just befuddles me how they ended up with the policy they did when they come to me. I'm just like, how did you end up with this? Like, you have machines that are clearly attached to your business that are fixtures, and you have them listed as personal property. These are $100,000 machines, and your business personal property coverage is, $1 million, but you've got $5 million of machines in your facility. Like, how did you end up with this insurance? And it's because that broker they were working with didn't know what they were doing. And it drives me nuts.
And or the client is just focused strictly on cost.
Right.
And, unfortunately, a lot of times you get what you pay for. But then it does go again, on the broker to really explain, the value that you're getting for that cost. And, the cheapest policy out there isn't always the best, at the time of need.
Yeah. Especially when you find out things like how co-insurance works and how your claim for, $2 million just got reduced to $1 million because your co-insurance was way off,
Right.
Yeah. People, the surprises people find out in the insurance industry is pretty nuts. But a good broker will get you around that. If you have a good broker that knows what they're doing and they work in that industry, they'll be able to get you the right policy at a good price, and you won't have to worry about those things because they'll make sure it's done the right way. And it sounds like with all the stuff you do, you'll be able to really help them, not only get to the right broker, but also have the information the broker will need to make sure that that's handled appropriately. So that's really cool the way you do this.
That's 100% correct.
Yeah, that's cool. So what's the best advice that you can give people or businesses today? What's the best advice you can give?
Yeah, I would say that we've talked a lot about it, but protection first, making sure that you have a solid foundation of protection. and get to a 20% savings rate of your gross income.
Interesting.
You know,
Why
I
those
think,
two? Why those two things?
yeah. Again, great question. Most people that we work with they're working with us because there's some future event that they're planning for. Again, it might be a new house, it might be retirement for themselves, college planning for their kids, and or exiting their business. And like I said before, most of that stuff doesn't happen, in the next 12 months. They occur at some point in the future. And so in order to successfully to get whatever it is that we're planning towards, we really must first protect against the threats that exist today that could literally derail the ability to get to that event in the future. So that's why protection's got to come first, because we need to take care of today before we can even start planning for the future.
So obvious with what's going on with the coronavirus and COVID and the stay-at-home orders. So that's become even more obvious today that's definitely a key cornerstone to this whole process. That's great.
Yeah. And the second one,
the savings. Jump into that one.
Yeah. So the second is savings rate, and the reason savings is so important is because it's the one thing that we can control.
Okay.
Again, we believe that optimal savings rate that people should strive for is 15 to 20%. I actually believe that savings rate is even more important than rate of return alone. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. We need rate of return to get the compounding our money, but it shouldn't be the primary focus, right? What I find is a lot of times people are striving for a return, in essence, to make up for their lack of savings.
You showed me before that diagram, you were kind of explaining it to me, that concept, and you were using your own system to show it to me. Can you show that to my audience? Can you show them what you're talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me bring that up. So what we're going to look at here is we're going to look at somebody who maybe they're 35 years old, so they have 30 years study period to retirement. And let's just say this could be an individual making $200,000 a year, or this could be a household making $200,000 a year. Whoops, one too many zeros. And it's safe to say that somebody making $200,000 today over the period of 30 years is going to receive, cost of living adjustments over time. On average, over 30 years, what do you think people's income would increase by? Eric, what do you think?
Normally, I would say probably like 3-4%, but with the Fed pumping in several $1 trillion into the economy, maybe a little bit more with inflation over the next couple of years. But to stay safe, let's say void of any Fed interventions. I'll say 3-4%.
Yeah, let's be conservative. Say 3%. Understanding that if 4%, the number I'm going to show you here in a minute is going to be even that much greater, right?
Yep.
So I'm gonna recalculate this, and what you're gonna see over here on the side is a bar chart, and it's gonna literally represent every dollar that's gonna flow into this family's life over the next 30 years. And so year one, here's the $200,000. Year two, there's the $206,000, the 3% increase on the original $200,000 plus the $200,000 that was there in year one gives us $406,000. So compounded over time, what this family is going to actually physically come into their life is about $9.5 million. So this is a sample client. So this is what a healthy Mr. and Mrs. sample client working for the next 30 years, no unexpected life events occurring. This is the amount of capital that's going to literally flow into their lives. Now, if we could invest 100% of what we saved, on average, again, over a 30-year period of time, what rate of return do you think most people would be satisfied with over that period?
with CDs at banks being 0.7% or whatever crazy number that they don't pay you anything for, I would say if you're like, 7-8%, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. So let's, what I hear most of the time is the same thing, 8%. So let's use 8%. So again, $9.5 million literally is flowing into our life. If we could save 100% of everything that we make and we can get an 8% return on it, that $9.5 million now compounds to almost $33 million.
Cool.
Okay. Now, the challenge is, from my perspective, is I've yet to meet the client who can save 100% of their income, right? Because of the fact that we have
in jail because they didn't pay their taxes.
Right. We have things like taxes, and it's not just income taxes. It's all forms of taxes. It's sales tax, property tax. If you have local tax, it's all forms of taxes. Debt, again, Visa, MasterCard, auto loans, student loans, mortgages, and then lifestyle. Lifestyle being Starbucks, going to Target for groceries or home goods. It's putting gas in the vehicle. It's entertainment, going to the movies, doing the things that we enjoy doing that gives us satisfaction of life.
Cool.
So I'm gonna put in here. I'm just gonna put 95% in here for lifestyle, but understand that 95% represents taxes, it represents debt, and it represents lifestyle. Which the result of that 95% means that we're only saving 5% of our total of what we bring in. So now when I recalculate this, what you're going to see is you're going to see green and you're going to see red. The green represents the dollars that we keep. The red represents dollars that came in one pocket and went out the other. So what's fascinating about this chart for me is the chart still represents the $33 million that we initially saw. It's just that 1.6 million of that we keep. The other 31.3 million, again, went in one pocket and went out the other.
But why would it still be $31 million? Because you're not getting interest on that spent money. Like, why is it there? Why is it 31
Yeah, so that's a great question. And have you ever heard of the concept called the miracle of compound interest?
Yeah, like rule of 72 and whatever your interest rate is. Yeah, definitely.
So the miracle of compound interest works for us, but that's only part of the story. It also works against us. Meaning that if I go to Starbucks this afternoon and I buy a $4 coffee, that $4 is no longer on my balance sheet, right?
Okay.
I not only lost the $4, but I lost the 8% earning potential that $4 would have earned had it maintained on our balance sheet. Okay. So just like we have a growing exponential curve that's working for us, we have a declining exponential curve that's working against us.
Oh, I get it. So you're saying the compound interest on what you would have saved, but you spent instead. So this is like basically your potential. This was the potential savings you could have had.
That's correct.
Okay, got it.
So the goal is, from my perspective, is how do I get some of this red to come back up here to the green?
Please tell us. I want to know.
So first off, let me share with you what most people or most advisors would focus on. They would take a look at the client's portfolio and then say, hey, you have a good portfolio here, but I think with some minor changes, we can do a better job. We can get a better return. Okay. And I'm going to go to the highest extreme that I can go to, and let's just say it's 12%. Okay. Now understand that this is completely unrealistic, because this would mean that over a 30-year period of time, I'm getting 12% year in, year out, each and every year.
Sounds like that's a Ponzi scheme, essentially.
It's very the possibility of doing that is very small, right?
Yeah.
If anybody knew how to do that, they would own all the money, right?
Your name's not Madoff. Your name's not Bernie. So
the point of this is that people are focused on rates of return, right?
Got it.
and using rates of return to increase this number. So when I calculate this, remember this number was 31 million. This number was 1.6.
Yep.
When I recalculate at a higher rate of return, it should be to no surprise to anybody that the green is now more.
Gotcha.
It's doubled, but the red also doubled, because again, if I could really get 12% on my money, that $4 that I spent on Starbucks, I'm giving up 12% on that $4.
How much, what was the savings on that one? How much savings? I'm going to write this down.
This is saving 5%.
No. The green. What was the green?
Gotcha. The green is 3.4 million.
3.4. Okay. I just want to make sure I have notes on this.
Yep. And the red is 65 million.
65. Got it.
And again, that's chasing an unrealistic 12% return year.
Oh yeah. That's not even possible. Yeah.
Eric, do we have any control over what the market does?
Not a thing, not a thing at all in the world. And you can definitely see that with the volatility in today's market. It's pretty nuts. Yeah,
absolutely. We have as individual investors, we have zero control over what the market does. So why is it that most advisors focus on this here? Is because they don't understand how cash flow works. So let me just take this back to our original number of 8%. And rather than focus on chasing rates of return, let's focus on what we can control, and that is our cash flow. So if we could put ourselves in an optimal position of saving 20%, right, which means 80% of our cash flow goes to lifestyle, paying off debt, paying taxes, 20% left over, again at our original 8% rate of return, and I recalculate this, what you see is that we're able to create significantly more wealth. This number is 6.5. What was the number before?
It was 3.4. That's 6.6.
Correct, 6.6, right? We took less risk than what it took to get to the 3.4, and we minimized the lost opportunity cost significantly from 65 million to 26 million.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
And I would even beg to say that most people, even though they say 8%, most people 8% is probably more than what they're comfortable with. So let's take this down to 6%. So again, half the risk of what we started with, we still have more return, right?
Yep.
And we've done so in a more efficient manner. So the point of this is, yes, we need return, and this isn't to say that you can't take risk. It's just that most people have their eye on the wrong prize. They have their eye on rates of return rather than the things that they can control, which is cash flow.
Wow.
Or savings, saving their money through managing their cash flow.
And what at 3%? What was the green again at the end? How much did that come out to?
At 3%, what do you mean 3%?
What? Yeah, 4.7.
4.7 at 6% return.
At 6%. Okay, at 6%.
Yep.
What's it at 3? I'm just curious.
Almost 3 million, which is still 70% more than what we had in the original scenario.
That's almost 3 mil. That was like, wow. That's nuts. That's really interesting. So basically, the thing that you have control of, your savings, is going to have more of a compounding effect than the interest rate's going to have on anything.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is there are products in our industry that will guarantee a 3% return over time that have no risk.
Yeah, like treasury bonds and things like that.
There are products that are fully guaranteed, but yeah, I mean, we don't have to. The point of this is we don't have to take risk.
Yeah.
To ultimately create return, as long as we're good stewards of our cash flow.
Wow. That is pretty cool. That's great. And not only that, but when you take those bigger risks on the rate of return, that means you're taking bigger risks. It means you're having sleepless nights worried about what's going on with my money? Where is this stuff going? Yeah.
It's 100% correct. And again, this is where emotions start playing a role. Market goes down 20%. Everybody's first inclination is, let me get out to stop the bleeding. But the reality is, unless you need access to that capital, in the next 2 to 5 years, which the reality is, if you needed access to the capital in the next 2 to 5 years, you were in the wrong portfolio to begin with, right?
Right.
So the reality is, if you look at the history of the market, over time, the markets will come back, right? Even if we think the S&P 500 is going to increase by 5% over the next 10 years, that's going to take us well beyond what it was pre-COVID. Which, and 5% I think is probably a fairly conservative number, just based upon what it's been in the last number of years. Again, my role is part to take the emotions out of it and approach things, with levity and rational thought.
Financial plan, right?
Yeah.
Financial planner.
Financial plan.
That's awesome, Will. This has been insightful. I appreciate you sitting down with me today and going over this, because this is stuff that, you don't think about this stuff. You don't realize how it works. To get this kind of advice and this kind of information is vital for my audience. And I really appreciate it. I'm going to put your information back up on the board again. Do you have any parting words that you'd like to say to the audience before we go?
No, I thank you, Eric, for having me on and letting me share, my story and what it is that we do. Again, I think that, if people have questions, if people, want to take a deeper dive into what they have going on, more than happy to sit down and have a conversation. I think that, again, the whole reason I got into this business 17 years ago was to help people. And if I'm not helping people, then I'm not doing what I set out to do. So
I know you help a lot of people because you've got a ton of connections. So it's always, I think if anybody asks me, I'll definitely refer them your way. I think you know your stuff. Like, this is pretty amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and I will catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Eric.
All right. Bye.